paying the final balance for my student loan, or so I thought. This was back in the late 90s before payments could be made via websites. So all payments had to be made by check and mailed into the loan company.
I know. The dark ages.
I had finally progressed to the point where I was able to make my final payment on my college student loans. The way this was supposed to work is that I was supposed to call the loan company to receive my final payoff amount and then send that amount in via a check. They said that I would receive my final papers within 30 days showing the loan had been paid in full. I wrote out the check for the exact amount that they gave me and promptly mailed it in.
After 30 days I was quite pleased to see an envelope in the mail from the loan company.
However,
instead of the paid in full notice,
there was a bill for an additional amount owed. Apparently, I still had a balance of 5 cents. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. Instead of calling them up and begging them to forgive the remaining balance, I decided to send in the payment coupon with a dime.
Yes.
Double what was owed, taped to it. I wrote a note stating that I hope this covers the remaining balance. Did I mention that payment coupon came with a prepaid return envelope? They paid the postage for this? I received the final papers about 2 weeks later.
Edit.
Didn't realize this funny little story was going to bring so many smiles to this many people. I appreciate my first silver awards and the nice hug. Also early 90s. Closed a checking account, but didn't realize I had an outstanding debit coming in. A debit for $3.27. Yes, I remember the amount to this day. How did I find out about this egregious offense? A. Did the bank send me a letter? B. Did they call me? C. Did they close the account and turn it over to collections and tank my credit rating and I didn't find out because the collections agency did bother trying to collect such a small sum? So a couple years later I went to buy a house is when I found out about the massive $3.27 bill. I'm sure you can guess the answer. Edit. The outcome, I disputed the credit entry and it fell off after a while. The bank had been bought and sold at least once in that time and it obviously wasn't worth the debt collector's time to confirm the negative entry. It ended up stalling my purchase by several months.
A friend of mine just paid off his car.
After making a payment, he had $1.27 left on it. He saw this and decided to just pay it 2 weeks later on the next paycheck. The bank sent him an email. It wished him a happy birthday, and said that they have paid the remaining balance themselves. The title is in the mail. Some years back, Westminster Council kept sending my boss a bill for £1.97. The third or fourth time he just dropped £2 coins into the return envelope and sent it off. A few days later he received a receipt with 3 pennies taped to it. Way back in the early 90s, one year I had a state income tax refund of something like $2. When the government sent me the check, they included a slip of paper asking me not to request refunds for trivial amounts of money. Yeah, and if I had owed them the same amount and declined to pay it, they would have tried to garnish my wages.
The sheer gall of those ratfuckers still pisses me off today.
Now ask for a 5-cent refund. I had something similar where I had a balance of 12 cents on an account. Trying to be reasonable, I called and was told I needed to pay it. I sent 12 checks for 1 cent each.
Ha ha ha.
They paid for shipping. They had to send you back a check, and paid for that. Then some poor accounts receivable person had to do their little bit. Then put that dime in a cash box, in a place that probably never receives cash, and that had to count it down, and write a receipt. Fantastic. If you wait and don't cash it, they'll send you another. I had the opposite. I had a bit of money saved and decided I was sick of having my New Zealand student loan hanging over my head, so I sent a check for the exact amount. I didn't know that the NZ government had offered to top up any payments over the minimum by 10%. As I was overseas, they spent a year trying to pay me back $2,000. Similar experience. When we sold our last home and moved, we closed out our AT&T U-verse internet. We moved to an area that didn't have AT&T service, so our account was closed on the last day of the month. Apparently they didn't disconnect the internet for 2 days after we moved. 2 years later, my phone starts blowing up with bill collectors wanting their $2.17. I paid it but promised them I would never be a customer again. I once had to write a check to the state government for a photocopy. This happened to me when I paid off my student loans. I made the final payment online and they said it would take 2 days to process. After those 2 days, I called to make sure it was finished and they told me I had a balance of 10 cents because of the interest that accrued over the 2 days that it was processing.
I asked the guy on the phone.
You realize how ridiculous that is, right? He just sighed and accepted my card information to debit my account 10 cents. Here you can change your tax code to less than rate plus student loan. That means that the loan is paid off with your taxes. Easy. Well, you'd think. After several years of paying off my student loan, I asked for an update. Didn't happen by itself in dial-up days. Tax people say you're owed money as you've overpaid. Stop the student repayments and we'll send you just one check. Less work for me. Sweet. Refund coming my way. I go to work and say that they can switch me back to less than rate. No way, says payroll. I can set up student repayments just by asking. No paperwork involved. To stop it, I need the taxman. Non-gendered. Just generic. To send work a formal letter. Took weeks. I waited until my tax rate had changed before getting the refund. The first check I ever had to write was to the IRS for 4 cents. Similar thing happened to my husband, except it was only about 6 years ago. Student loans were paid in full, but for some reason, the school itself had him owing them, not the loan provider. Something like 5 cents. They sent letter after letter. Despite being recent, they had no option to pay this online. I sent email after email telling them I would gladly give them the 5 cents if they had a way to pay
online, as I'm not paying postage for that. Nope. More letters.
I finally emailed them and told them that they were spending more on resources and postage, and to just apply that money towards the balance next time instead of sending a letter.
Never heard from them again.
In the UK, student loan repayments are based on earnings, regulated through the government.
My friend was a student, but drove trucks for a decent wage during the summer.
He'd get loan repayments taken from his wages every month he worked, since he was earning more than the threshold for repayment. At the end of the year, he'd be given his loan repayments back as he didn't meet the threshold for
the whole year,
having only worked a few months. I continued checking my student loan balance for a couple years after I paid it off just to make sure it stayed paid off.
Same thing happens to my wife.
Made the final payment only to find out there was 50 cents or so left. I told her to make another payment right then before they tacked on interest. I had a similar situation
where I paid off a loan to my bank using the 14-day payoff listed.
I went and checked it about a week later thinking everything had cleared, and it showed I still owed like $2. I called the bank and argued with a nice lady for about 5 minutes before she just said, "Okay, I'll clear the account. You're good."
I'm like, how can you list a payoff price and then add interest to that? I had something similar happen on a car loan.
Except they didn't post my final payment when they received it. When I went to discuss what happened with the evidence,
they had cashed the check,
just not posted it to my loan, that the balance was paid on time. Their response was I just needed to pay the interest that had accrued from the time they actually received the payment until the time they posted the payment. I had to talk to 3 different people, each the manager for the previous, before someone realized, oh, since the error is ours, you don't have to pay the additional interest. Well, no $HT. I should have charged them for the time it took to get them to that. This same thing happened to my mother. Her bill was for a measly 1 cent. So she sewed a penny to the paper, really affixed it way more than necessary, and mailed it in. By the way, I think our petty compliance would also enjoy this story.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.